Welcome back to the Ultraviolet Tide. We are here with Bree Vanleeuwen, the CEO and founder of Daily Shade Sunscreen. Bree, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited you're here. You were telling me a little bit before that you just ran from hanging out with your kids and you were in a very true to you outfit. I love it. You got your
Yeah.
sun hat, you're ready to go. It's very on brand.
I think this is the first time I've worn a giant hat on a podcast because I'm obviously inside and it's unnecessary. However, I just ran from an event with my kids outside to here, but this is the truest version of me. You can usually spot me, whoever's wearing the biggest hat in the outside neighbor, even inside. I'm wearing a hat all the time. Whoever has the biggest hat on, it's 99% me. So
I
it's
love
very
it.
true to
I
form.
love it. I love it and very on brand for this podcast and everything we're going to
Yes.
talk about today. So, I will give a brief introduction to you so that the audience can get to know you a little bit better. And then we're going to dive into everything Daily Shade Sunscreen and the backstory of why it was founded, all of the good stuff that goes into formulating your sunscreen, and so much more. But Bree Van Leeuwen is the founder and CEO of Daily Shade Sunscreen, an 100% zinc sunscreen that is naturally derived, reef safe, and water resistant. She's a mom of four based in Utah and a PA with a passion for enjoying the sun safely. Now, this is the time of year where all parents are thinking about sun safety for their kids. And when I first started reading about Daily Shade, it sounded like really the story of the company's founded started with your daughter's experience.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I love that you say that all parents are thinking about this. I hope that's true. I can say from my own self, I was always very conscious and very aware of sunscreen for my children. I worked a day a week as a PA in reconstructive facial plastic surgery. And I would see these young girls come in with very, very large, deep scars that they were coming in for some reconstructive surgical work on that scar. And it was all from melanoma or squamous cell carcinoma, some version of skin cancer. And in my state of Utah, it's the number one state in the whole country for melanoma, which is really interesting.
Wow.
It's the elevation, the altitude, the year round sports, tons of fair skinned people that do year round athletics. So it's just the perfect environment. And then to add on to that, people here love to still go tanning. Like it's a thing.
Wow.
Tanning beds are still very busy. They leave the gym, they go right next door to the tanning bed. So it's definitely a thing. People still tan here. And the peak for women, the most common cancer for women aged 26 to 29 or 25 to 29 is melanoma. And
Hmm.
that's the most dangerous form of skin cancer. So I would see these girls coming in. I was very aware of my kids needing to wear sunscreen. So at a very, early stage of motherhood, I was thinking about that, but my friends weren't thinking about that. So it was this constant conversation of, do your kids have sunscreen? No, we're not. We don't need it. It's winter, or oh, we're
Hmm.
only going to be outside for an hour. And I'm like, they need it. They still need it. There was this constant conversation. And then my 1 year old had her like cake smash on the beach. You know that moment where they do the cake smash. I want to do it on the beach in Seaside, Florida. And my husband went and grabbed some sunscreen because we ran out. It was actually copper tone. It was the girl and then the dog's pulling her
Uh-huh.
diaper. If you've seen that.
Yep.
And
I'm
it's a very
familiar. Yeah.
common kid sunscreen. Like it says for babies across it, right? And it's in
Yeah.
like it has some other words like sensitive, or I don't know what the words are, but something that's very encouraging of a parent to purchase this sunscreen. It looks like it's made for children. So he grabbed it off, covered our 1 year old in the sunscreen, and within just, oh, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds, you can see her festering up, getting red and swollen and
Oh,
itchy. We
gee.
have it all on film. You can hear us in the background saying, what's going on? What is she doing? Why is she getting swollen? What's she allergic to? We're trying to cycle through all these things. And it turns out it was the chemical sunscreen that she was wearing because I'd never used that one on her before. My husband was the one who bought it that day. And that was the first moment for me that I realized that there was even a real strong difference in sunscreen presentations, right? Like I was depending on the marketing to help me select my
Right.
sunscreen, which I think most
Hmm.
parents out there, that's what we're doing is we're trusting the marketing thinking that you can. And now that I've been down this path for the last 5 years, I can tell you, you definitely cannot trust the marketing on a sunscreen label. I just wrote an article for the Huffington Post. I hope it gets picked up. But that was the entire topic of the article was all about how the front of sunscreen bottles tell lies to you that aren't necessarily facts. Like they'll say for kids, or even if they say, for adult or sport, on the back of the label on a lot of these products, if you were to compare line against line, it's the exact same formula. It's the exact
Oh,
same. There's
interesting.
nothing different.
Okay.
The only thing that's different is that they're trying to market something. Like, so they're pointing
Right.
out that it's, higher water resistance, or that it is, they use the words clean and safe, which are also these soft terms that really you can't trust. But
Right.
anyway, so yeah, I started using these true zinc sunscreens on my daughter, these natural based sunscreens. And one of two things would happen. One, I would use one that was marketed natural or mineral, or all these words safe, right?
Mhm.
And I thought I was putting on a true 100% zinc sunscreen. I would put it on her
Mhm.
and she'd still have a reaction. Like, what is going on? Is she that sensitive to sunscreen? And the reality is, it was actually a hybrid sunscreen, meaning that
Yeah.
with the FDA, there's this loophole where there's still these chemical filters, like butyl octyl salicylate. It's not registered with the FDA, but it is one little tiny bond different than
Mm.
octisalate, which is a registered UV filter.
Interesting.
Well, they can throw that in there and they don't have to list the amount. Like, with an active ingredient, you have to say, oh, there's 5%, 10%, 20%.
Right.
If it's an inactive ingredient, you don't even have to list the amount. So they can
Interesting.
just load this sunscreen in with butyl octyl salicylate, which helps it feel really nice. It feels lightweight. It feels like a chemical sunscreen because it is a chemical sunscreen. You're using a hybrid sunscreen. So once I learned that, then I started buying these, actually naturally true zinc sunscreens. And the problem is, the more natural and the better the ingredient deck, the whiter my daughter's face
Yeah.
got, because she looked like a little
Uh-huh.
ghost. It was this thick, white, greasy, pasty mess all over her.
Yep.
And it got to the point where, like, she looked like she had this severe case of dandruff, because she would have this white rim on the top of her hair.
Yeah.
And my husband's like, what's worse, this or skin cancer? I don't know. I'm like, that's a horrible thing to say. Of course, skin cancer. Like, we're doing this. And then it got
Right.
me thinking, why is it this way? Like, I cannot believe that we have
Right.
self-driving cars, that we've sent someone to the moon, that we can do all these amazing things. And my daughter can't wear a truly safe, not greenwash, but a truly safe natural
Mhm.
sunscreen that's made of just pure zinc without looking completely ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so that was kind of my first moment where I thought, like, why don't I fix it? I can fix
I
it
love
just like
that.
anybody can fix it, thinking that it was this easy thing. And then it took me 4 years, but anyway, that's a
I
long
did
answer.
read that it took 4 years, which
Yeah.
I think it's so important to talk about that because it takes a while to do what you set out to do and what you are now doing with Daily Shade. And what some people might not be aware of is the white labeling that kind of goes on in
Oh
the
yeah.
sunscreen industry.
Hmm.
And that is not what you guys did. So that is why it took 4 years. And can you walk us through like what went on behind the scenes over the course of those 4 years?
Yes, I could write an entire book about what went on behind the scenes during those 4 years. But the summary, the cliff notes, is when I initially had this idea and I started calling manufacturing houses, that's exactly what it was. They said, well, we've got all these formulations. Just let's come in, let's talk them through
Mhm.
and see which one you want. So I'd go in and I'd say, well, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. And they'd say, oh, it's not possible, right? Like,
Oh,
this is how you make a sunscreen. I'm like,
okay.
okay, but I can't. This is not the sunscreen that I want to make. I don't want to do this. And I got told
Mhm.
and there's not a ton of manufacturing houses, because sunscreen is a drug and it is registered through the FDA as an OTC, as a drug. So it's not a cosmetic. So you have to do it at
Mhm.
an OTC facility. And there's not a ton of those across the country.
Yeah.
But I went through them. Like, I definitely went through the manufacturing houses. And I was told time and time again, no, 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 you don't want to do that. Natural sunscreens, water based, without any of those boosters or filters. It's the hardest thing in the world to make. We try really hard to avoid that. It's just, you don't want to touch that. Like, this is tried and
Interesting.
true. Use this formula. This is the one you want. And after you hear it so many times, there's a part of you that's like, oh, maybe this is just what it is, and you kind of just start to think
Mhm.
this is maybe what it is. But I knew in, I don't know, a little, I don't even know what it is. I believe in God, right? Like, I'm a woman that believes in God, and I believe that God speaks to all of us. And I had this thing, something inside of me that just knew that there was a different way to do it, or it could be done, or keep pushing, right? Like, keep pushing for something different until you get a better answer. And I heard this idea once, that if an idea comes to you, that you should jump on it and try for it. And if you don't,
Mm.
that idea goes to someone else, because the idea wants to be alive. It wants to
Oh,
be. And if you can't
yeah.
create this idea, someone else will go do this idea. And I remember
Yeah.
hearing that and being like, no, no, this one's mine. I'm going to do this.
It's
And
gonna be
so,
me. Yeah.
yeah. So I actually ended up hiring a cosmetic chemist. So he came to our company, and and even he was like, "This is, I don't know if we can hit the numbers. I don't know if we can do this." And I'm like, "That's okay. Let's just try." And he was on board. He's like, he was fully invested in it. He's like, "I wanted to do something like this for a really long time. Let's do it." I'm like, "Great, let's do it." And so it took us so many iterations. I don't know the actual number. We went through it once, and there's formal iterations, and then ones that he would bring over, and I'd be like, "No, this is done." But it was dozens and dozens of these things that we went through until I got to the right place. And with the
Mm.
manufacturing houses that I was looking at using before, they would tell me, depending on the manufacturing house, 3 to 4 changes. And then if I didn't like the product, then I would have to pay another, X amount of money, 25,000, 15,000, whatever.
Yeah.
And they'd give me 3 or 4 more iterations of this product. Well, can you imagine the cost I would have spent going through that many iterations of
Right.
this product? And it made me realize, you kind of have this aha moment where you're like, oh, this is the reason that the products are the way they are on the shelf. It's money
Yeah.
and time. And especially big
Yeah.
corporations, forget it. They're not thinking about that. You know what they're thinking of? We're public, we have a board, we have people to report to, and we have a bottom line, right? So they're like
Hmm.
trying to make these compromises because they have to.
Yeah.
I didn't have to. I was a working PA. Then I transitioned and taught at the UVU PA program full time. And this was sort of this side hustle for me at the beginning where I was really passionate about it, but it wasn't my livelihood. And I had the time to make it right. I didn't compromise on it. But
Hmm.
there were moments for sure where it felt like, "Ugh, we're just going to have to do it like everybody else. It's not possible."
Yeah.
And then we figured it out.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something too that it's funny because sunscreen is obviously very different from some protective clothing, but a lot of the things are very similar because it does come down to like a composition to make that product work to keep you sun safe. So a
If
lot
you're
of
doing it
our
correctly. Yeah.
Totally. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what I was going to say is there are a lot of loopholes when it comes to
Mhm.
sun protective apparel. And that is the reason why you see some items that are more expensive and some items that are $10 on Amazon. And the difference between that is how are we creating the textile so that it keeps you sun safe? Is it going to wash out with wear? Is it going to keep you cool? Or are you going to put on this item and you are just going to be so hot that you will be
Oh, we've all
miserable
had
and
that.
never want to go
Yeah.
outside? Yes,
Mhm,
it is a
mhm.
huge thing. So your formulation is 100% non-nano zinc sunscreen. And for people listening, they're like, well, what the heck is non-nano zinc sunscreen? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's actually a school of people that are like, "Non-nano zinc sunscreen isn't a thing, it doesn't exist." So the terminologies in the sunscreen world can get a little confusing because there's when we're talking about physical barrier sunscreen or chemical sunscreen, then the other side says everything's a chemical. That's a misnomer. That's a totally wrong
Hmm.
way to word that. I agree. It's not my favorite terminology either. I'm a physician assistant. I think that's a terrible name. Like I didn't name it. I didn't name him chemical and physical barrier. I would have named it something different, but here we are. So when I'm talking about these ingredients and these products, know that the terminology isn't always great. Even the word organic, when people hear the word organic, they think, oh, that must be really natural and clean. Well, in a sunscreen world, organic sunscreens are the chemical sunscreens that we are doing our
Mm,
very best to avoid in this company.
that's
So that
interesting.
word, I know, because people think, oh, I'm wearing an organic sunscreen. I'm like, oh, but do you actually know what that means? Because I don't think it means what you think it means.
Probably not. Yeah.
Probably not. So yeah, with the non-nano zinc, basically what that means is that the particle size of the zinc is not going to be absorbed into the superficial layers of your skin or absorbed into your skin, period. So when we're talking about, there's really 3 big categories of sunscreen. So there's the physical barrier sunscreens that the FDA only recognizes 2 active ingredients. It's the zinc and titanium filters. Those are the only 2 registered by the FDA. And those are actually the only 2 across the entire board that they consider generally safe for use. They call it,
Mm.
is it GRACE or some like acronym like that?
Oh, yep.
Generally safe for use. Grease, or yeah, I would try to
Yeah.
avoid it because again, I wouldn't have named it that. But generally, thought of to be safe for use because there's no evidence that these enter the bloodstream, that they don't cause endocrine disruption. There's no cause for concern in this category. The only problem with them is that they're historically terrible to wear. They're thick and pasty and white and all these bad things.
Mhm.
Okay, that's over here in the physical barrier world. Then there's the chemical sunscreens or the organic, which sounds really great. totally misleading because chemical sunscreen filters are things that start with an A or an O, and they're kind of these long words like
Mhm.
octisalate. All the benzones that you hear about are in this chemical
Yeah.
sunscreen category. This category is getting a lot of heat lately because the FDA is now requiring new testing procedures on the chemical sunscreen filters because what they're finding is that they are entering into the blood system and causing endocrine disruption. And if anyone who's been in the industry a long time is kind of like, oh, finally this is happening because we've known this for a long time. And it's to the point where the FDA is actually requiring animal studies be done again. Can you
Mm.
imagine how much heat the FDA is getting from PETA and other animal, protective agencies
Yeah.
about doing that? I mean, that's how bad
Right.
the evidence has to be for them to open that can of worms, right?
Right.
And what we're finding is if you were to test your blood and breast milk a couple hours after applying these chemical sunscreen filters, you find evidence of those in the blood and breast milk. This is
Mm.
this is they're absorbed because in order to work they have to go into your skin, trap the heat and release it. That's how they work. So my daughter had an allergic reaction to that category because whatever was entering into her blood system was obviously in children their blood or their skin is thinner. They're much more
Right.
hyperreactive to things. There's all these reasons why children can't be using these products. And the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Dermatology Board, all of them recommend using a mineral or physical based sunscreen on your children because of all of the changes and differences in a
Yeah.
child and an adult. One of those in particular that I always harp on because it's so real is this endocrine disruption moment where we really are finding that these chemical sunscreens are competing with receptor sites like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, just to
Mm.
name a couple. These ingredients are coming through and knocking those out so that what should
Interesting.
be binding, like estrogen and progesterone, they should be binding. Well, this
Mhm.
little molecule that you just put on with your sunscreen is like, oh no, I like that house, and it wants to come
Mm.
live there, and it kicks out the hormone. They're competing,
Interesting.
right? And sometimes they don't, sometimes they do, but it's a competition, and it's really disrupting our system and our children's system.
Mhm.
And then in the middle, this is where most sunscreen companies live, is the hybrid world that I talked about with my daughter, where they have a little bit of physical barrier, but then they have a lot or a little bit of the chemical filter, right? It's some kind of mix of that. That's a really sneaky place to live because the marketing has no regulation. You do not have to put,
Mm.
you could even say, being a hybrid sunscreen, you can say, I'm 100% mineral sunscreen. Like that is
And
legal.
still have.
It is
Yeah.
legal and still have who knows the amount or percentage of inactive ingredients over here that are actually chemical filters, but you don't have to say that because it's not in your active. You can just say, oh, we're
Mm.
100% mineral sunscreen. The other day I picked up one that had
Interesting.
2% zinc and they said on the front, 100% mineral sunscreen. And I'm like, how are you hitting an SPF 50 with 2%
With
zinc?
2%.
Ours has 20% zinc, and we hit an SPF 30 with water resistance and 52 without. Like, that's 20% zinc. That's what we hit. And that was a fight.
Mhm.
So, all that tells you is that sunscreen is filled, 98% of it, with organic chemical
Mm.
sunscreen filters. But the general consumer doesn't know that. They think they're buying
Right.
100% mineral sunscreen.
Right.
So
Yeah.
sneaky. So,
It
so,
is
so
sneaky.
sneaky. Yeah.
It is. So that's when you
Yeah.
talk about like those hidden UV chemical filters, that's what you're
Yes.
referring to. Those
That's what I'm
sneaky things that
referring
are hidden
to.
in there.
These
Mm.
sneaky moments. And again, the marketing, it's like I really hope with this movement coming through, I hope that people don't turn away if they don't have the political affiliation that they think should belong to that. And I hope they can recognize it as a moment where our children deserve to be given the very best product, but as a consumer, and as a mom, as a dad, as a caregiver, there is no way for you to filter through all of this given the current allowances in marketing. I mean, there's no way for us to filter through because I know all of this about sunscreen. 99% of the population probably doesn't. But if I go
Right.
in to buy food or something like that, I'm just as blind as anybody else. And I'm buying
Yeah.
into all the marketing on the food labels, right?
Mhm.
So I really hope that there's a shift of real transparency, especially in the sunscreen space, where we have to start saying we're a hybrid sunscreen, we are a true zinc sunscreen or a true mineral sunscreen, or we are a chemical sunscreen. I hope there is some transparency that will start to be required once this testing is taking place and they recognize, yeah, there's some danger, some harm. And I also hope that they'll come through and say, okay, we now know that these are not recommended for children. So if you're going to market and
Right.
create a product that says for kids or for babies, it has to be zinc or titanium. period, with no boosters, no chemical filters. Like that's it. It has to be
Mhm.
zinc or titanium, right? Like I hope that we
Yeah,
arrive at that place, but that's years down the road if that ever
I
does
know.
happen. So we're trying really hard to do it the right way. We only have the one product out now, and then we have a couple more coming out soon, which I'm so excited about.
Oh,
But
that's exciting.
it is exciting, but we're moving slow because doing it the right way, it doesn't happen overnight. It is really, really difficult. And
Yeah,
when you see these companies putting out product after product, this is called white label. There is no way they are creating their own formulations in that short of time. Either they have like a billionaire backer
right.
or
They have
or
a
they're
lot of
white
funds.
labeling,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think so this is super interesting because you talk about safe sunscreen for kids, and to be completely honest, when I am thinking about putting sunscreen on my son, which I can't yet, he's too young, but once he's able to finally wear sunscreen, I am not super excited to put sunscreen on his body,
Yeah.
knowing what you have just talked about. I know a lot about sun protective apparel, so I just want to throw some protective apparel on him. But obviously, we know that the two have to be used together, that it's not kind of one or the other, that we need both, especially if kids are out playing sports and
Mm.
they're out at the pool all day and they're out at the beach. Like they want to enjoy time outside, and you don't want to limit them. Like you want them to be able to enjoy.
Oh, 100%. And one of my biggest mom hacks, and I own a sunscreen company, I have endless supplies of sunscreen in my home. And one of my biggest mom hacks is long sleeve rash guards and long sleeve swimmers. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like putting sunscreen on my kid any more than the person next. It sucks. Your kid hates wearing it. You have to fight him. You have to like
Yeah.
last weekend I'm running around the soccer field covering my 2-year-old son in sunscreen and he's screaming and I'm like, I wish people could see this moment because this is the
Yep,
reality. Kids don't
yep,
want to brush their teeth. I lay my 2-year-old down and brush their teeth even if he's crying because I know how important it is to brush his teeth. I do the same thing with sunscreen. It's not fun
mhm,
to put it on.
right,
And we'll talk
uh-huh,
about some fun ways I think, later and I've tried to come up with some, but in the heat of the moment at a soccer game when you don't have a bunch of tricks to pull out of your sleeve, sometimes you just got to get it done. But one of my biggest hacks that I agree with you on is wear the long sleeve swimmer. I wish that rash guards and long sleeve swimmers were just thought of across the board as this is what everybody does so that your kid's
yep,
not the odd man out.
agreed,
Compared to when I was young, there's so many more kids in rash guards and long sleeve swimmers, and the styles now are so cute. Thank
mhm,
you. Like the styles are so darling. But it didn't used to be that way. So I hope that that becomes more of a norm because that is one of my biggest mom hacks. Like use the high quality sunscreen for their face, for their ears, for the back of their neck, for the top of their feet, and then cover
mhm,
them up with some long sleeve swimmers and long sleeve rash guards. And
yep,
that, I mean, that just helps everybody involved, right? My kids won't keep a hat on. That's the one thing that I'm like, when people say, if your kid doesn't like to wear sunscreen, put on a hat. I'm like, you ever try to put a hat on a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old? This does not go
good
down.
luck.
Good luck. My kids don't do this. I now they're getting a little older, it's a little bit better, but in the pool, I'm like, no, they're not going to keep a hat on, right? So use the
Mhm,
high quality stuff on the areas that are the most high risk and dangerous, like the face, head, and neck. And that is the most high risk area for melanoma. It's what actually, if you were to metastasize, it metastasizes quicker and it goes to the brain and it's the most deadly form. So if you're
mhm,
going to focus on an area, that's why we created our first one to be a daily wear, a little bit of a tint that doesn't leave a color behind, but just blends in beautifully on the skin because that is the most high risk area on a body is the face, ears, neck, right, scalp.
mhm,
So those are the areas you want to protect for sure. And then yeah, wear the swimmers, wear the long sleeves, wear the rash guards. The marriage of the two is the most beautiful thing.
agreed, I completely agree, and I did wanna talk about so let's get back into talking a little bit about marketing because you shared on Instagram a post talking about how boys are less likely to wear sunscreen than
Oh
girls
yeah.
because sun care is marketed as beauty instead of health and strength. And I love that because I do think we've seen this beautiful transition of people wearing sunscreen, but you're right, it's with women, it's in beauty products. It's seen as oh, wrinkles and anti-aging and
Hmm.
a beauty standard. It is not marketed towards young men. So, can
Mm-mm.
you share a little bit more about what you're seeing from a sunscreen perspective on some of these marketing things that you are trying to redirect the narrative on?
Oh yes. Okay, so I think one point you hit on that's very important that we should mention is it is a beauty trend, but the beauty trend happens when I think we're about 25 and 30. At least for me, that's when I got really good about putting on sunscreen. And
Mhm.
you know why? It was vanity. It was like, oh, I'm getting hyperpigmentation. These freckles are new.
Yeah.
Like, fine lines, better wear my sunscreen. I wasn't thinking about that when I was young. My mom wasn't
Yeah.
putting sunscreen on me every day. And the truth is, up to 80% of sun damage in a person's whole life happens before the age of 18. And yet,
Yeah.
we're not doing anything about it. Like in Australia, they're doing all these measures, right? They're putting on the 3-inch wide brim hats before they go outside. Like they understand it. In America, we're not thinking about it until we start to get vanity at 25, right?
Mhm.
Then the other piece of that is monkey see, monkey do. If your son sees his dad put sunscreen on every single day, you know what that boy's going to think is normal? Is putting
Mhm.
sunscreen on every day. Like that becomes his new norm, right? Men suck at putting on sunscreen. My husband is the worst. I'm like, you can lead a horse to water, but I'm like shoving his head down and like trying to make him drink it. Men are the worst. And when he goes to put it on, he'll like, I'm gonna do a reel on this because it's so funny. He like puts a whole bunch in his hand, way more than he needs. And then he takes his hands like this. And so now most of it's in his palms, right? And then he
Mhm.
like aggressively is doing this on his face. And when he says, I hate,
Uh-huh.
I hate sunscreen. I'm like, of course you do. This is how you're putting it on. This was years ago before he knew better.
Mhm.
Now that we have a product that A is actually feels good to wear, and B, I've taught him like this isn't how you put on sunscreen. Let me teach you how to put sunscreen on. He wears it every day, and our son
Yeah.
sees him put it on, right? Like he sees him
Mhm.
shave, he sees him put on deodorant, he sees him brush his teeth, he sees him put on sunscreen. My son has put on. I only have one boy, and he's almost 3, and he has watched my husband put on sunscreen every day. We have put sunscreen on him every single day since he was even before 6 months old because mine's pure zinc, and I felt great about it. I'm not recommending that. I'm part of the FDA, 6 months and up. But I was doing it before that, right? Because mine's pure zinc and diaper rash cream is made out of pure zinc. I tested him, he did great. So my kid's been in sunscreen since he was just a little tiny baby. And so for him, it is just part of what life is. He doesn't know anything different. Now, that intervention isn't always going to be the case. There might be listeners out there that are like, oh, shoot, my son's 12 and I've never showed him to put on sunscreen. He doesn't think that's a normal intervention, right?
Mm.
Totally. And there's this really cool study out of Germany that I did a reel on that was so great that
Yes.
showed that these people were going to these preschools in Germany and they spent 20 minutes, just that's it, 20 minutes telling this story about how fruits and vegetables are these magical superheroes, right? It was a
Mhm.
20-minute tale of the magic of fruits and vegetables. At the end of this, they presented these children with candy or fruits and vegetables, and 80% of the kids took the fruits and vegetables over the candy.
Mhm.
The only reason is because the narrative around those fruits and vegetables changed. It
I
wasn't
love
because
that.
they were different all of a sudden. It was because the vision they had in their mind, the image they had, the picture was like, oh my gosh, they're superheroes. So when you're
Mhm.
going to talk to your kids about this, you teach them. Kids are smart. They love to learn and they want to know the why. I mean, like, why is the constant question for my 2-year-old daughter, right? And I think if we can take the time, even if it's, it doesn't have to be 20 minutes, 5 minutes, and tell your kids why they have to put the sunscreen on, show them images of sunscreen or skin cancer. I don't think a little bit of a scare is the worst tactic in the world. Show them what it looks like to have skin cancer because it is the reality. It is the most common cancer in America. It affects
Mhm.
1 in 5 people. Like 1 in 5 people by the time they're 70 will have skin cancer. One in
Yeah.
five. Like
Yeah.
that is a crazy statistic.
It
And it's
is.
over 90% preventable with the right habit. Like you can prevent that 90% of the time if you just help your kids learn how to have the proper habits in their youth. So I think there's a component of, oh, it's just one more thing, or maybe we're not taking the time, or we don't think it's important. And that's one of the biggest things I'm trying to do is teach parents and teach people and have this educational moment and this habit shift of like, no, 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 no. Kids brush their teeth and they put on sunscreen. Like we are trying to decrease the most common cancer in America. The most common cancer in America is over 90% preventable. The most common cancer is the most preventable cancer. And yet it is still the most common because we aren't stepping in and doing what we need to in the youth. Like that's the
Yeah.
reality of what it is. So anyway, I'm not even sure what the original question was.
No, no,
We just gone
that
down
was
a road.
perfect. Well, because I think that is such an important thing. It is kids learn by seeing, and then
Yeah.
they do it. And
It's those mirror
if
neurons, right? They do what they
for
see,
sure.
whether that's don't yell and you're yelling at them. Well, they're hearing what you're saying, but they're gonna listen to you're yelling and then they're gonna yell because you're yelling. Like it's a mirror
Right.
neuron moment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's great advice.